Hello, this is Arielle from Inconspicuous Bear, and I'll be narrating the heroic version of the Blast Furnace encounter in Blackrock Foundry from a Guardian point of view. Blast Furnace is basically Gallicraft 2.0. There's a lot of little things to tank throughout the fight, and at the very end of the fight, there's one big thing that can be kind of painful to tank for a long period of time. So, yeah, you'll find that for the most part, this encounter is incredibly boring. So, try not to fall asleep, I guess. In the first phase of the encounter, there are four different kinds of mobs. One is a mini-boss called Foreman Feldspar. He does fire things. I never tank him, so I don't really know what he does, but he dies pretty easy, I guess. I don't know. The second thing the second mob is the Bellows Operator. It's this big Ogron-looking dude. He doesn't actually do anything in Phase 1, so he doesn't attack. He just kind of stands there and occasionally interacts with the furnace. The third kind of thing is an engineer who will occasionally do this thing called shock or jolt or something, some sort of electricity thing, which you can interrupt. And he will also use a spell called repair, which is really bad. So you need to make sure that someone isn't interrupting or stunning him out of that as well. And the last kind of mob is called a defender or a security guard. That's what it is. That uses this ability called defense, which basically throws down a shield on the ground, which has a circular graphic on it, and anything that is able to move and is inside that circular graphic takes 90% less damage. That means it doesn't matter if the Bellows Operator is inside the circle because he's unaffected by it in Phase 1. So just make sure you're moving engineers and the security guards out of the shield circle thingy so that they can be killed during Phase 1. Otherwise, Phase 1 is unbelievably boring and it doesn't really matter. Phase 2 has different mobs, but it's the transition from Phase 1 to Phase 2 that's the first dangerous part, because the Bellows Operators will be able to move if they're still alive, and they use this frontal cone attack. It's called like a bellowing shout or something, does a lot of physical damage. So make sure that you're using probably Survival Instincts for that, and make sure that your DPS are killing them as soon as humanly possible, because it makes it really difficult to move, or to consolidate your raid into one group after being split for most of the encounter, or for being split for the first phase, because the shout will basically kill anyone that's trying to run behind you. So make sure that dies as soon as humanly possible, and that you're cooldowning the damage from it so that you don't get murdered, because it hurts a lot. Phase 2 continues to be boring and uneventful. The security guards continue to spawn, except there's only one total on an irregular interval. I forget what the timer is, but every so often one security guard will spawn, and two flame callers will spawn. These are new mobs. They cast Pyroclasm, I think, or Pyroblast or something, which does a little bit of fire damage to a few targets. You can basically just ignore it. In the overall scheme of things, it's basically no damage, so there's not worth paying attention to. The thing you do need to pay attention to is something called Cauterized Wounds. If either the flame callers casts it, it needs to be interrupted. So usually what happens is one tank is responsible for one fire caller and interrupts Cauterized Wounds if it happens, and then you kill the fire callers between killing the elementalists, so that you don't get overrun and never have more than two up at any given time. Otherwise, this phase is very boring, and again, you have to move the security guards away from everything, because if they drop a shield on top of an elemental that you're trying to kill to pop a shield, it gets really annoying. So just make sure that you're keeping the security guards away from anything that otherwise needs to die. Phase 3 is the really dangerous part from a tank point of view. The elemental comes out and your raid needs to position themselves correctly in order to deal with the little pools, while also cleaning up any remaining adds so the tanks don't get overwhelmed. And the tanks need to make sure that they're handling the mechanics of the elemental correctly. These mechanics are called heat and tempered. Basically, tempered increases the amount of damage that you take from heat, and it stacks. It's like a debuff that stacks, and you gain one stack of tempered if your heat level exceeds the current amount of tempered that you have, or you get your first stack of heat. It sounds really strange, but basically the gist of it is that whoever starts tanking the boss, or whenever you tank the elemental for the first time, your number of stacks of tempered will equal your number of your stacks of heat, and then you'll just get one stack of tempered every time you swap. That's basically the gist. And then heat is a stacking fire debuff that goes on top of you. You taunt on three stacks of heat, and it does damage over time. Now, one thing to remember is that at 3 stacks, this thing's doing like around 90k damage every time it ticks, which is a lot, and it's magic damage, so it hurts. which means you want to definitely keep pulverize up as much as humanly possible. And when you're at even 2 stacks, it's a very good idea to barkskin to basically help your healers out, because they still have to deal with blast, which is a huge amount of raid damage. So you want to be rolling all of your cooldowns, trinkets, potions. Snarling Ward is extremely strong here. Any DLC procs. Basically dump all of your rage into Frenzy Regen and Tooth and Claw, because his overall melee damage is trivial. It's the fire that's going to kill you. So make sure that you're dumping your rage into Tooth and Claw and Frenzy Regen, especially if you have 2-piece, and then just there's no real reason to use Stab's Defense in this phase, because his melee swings are, like I said, meaningless. So just make sure you're doing your best to keep yourself alive and moving when the raid needs to move, because the area where the raid is standing will fill up with basically pools, and you need to be backing up the boss in accordance with the raid so that they have more room to fill up with pools. It requires a lot of communication with your raids, so just make sure you're on top of that. Talents are your pretty standard fare. It's basically just Feline Swiftness, Snarling Ward, Soul of the Forest, Dream of Snarius, and Pulverize. You could, the ads aren't dangerous, otherwise you might actually consider GOE for your level 100 talent. But something that's not included in here, I should probably mention, is having Bash for a secondary interrupt is really strong. And even Typhoon, sort of. But definitely the Bash, just in case your Skull Bash is on cooldown and then Cauterize Wounds is happening, that needs to get interrupted, so you need to stop it as soon as possible. So having Bash there is a very good thing to have in those situations. For Guardian tips, I like to use Zerk on the second wave of ads in Phase 1, because the first wave is easily handled by DPS using their 3-minute cooldowns and stuff. So I like to use Zerk there, just as a DPS cooldown, because when else am I going to use it, basically? You can drag the defenders on top, or the security guards on top of the elementalists, so long as the elementals, the slag elementals, don't get into the shield. So you can do extra damage to the slag, or the primal elementalists if you want. At this point, you probably shouldn't have a problem if your DPS are competent. So it might be the best idea is to keep the security guards away if you're tanking the security guards. If you're just only tanking a fire caller, definitely drag it on top of the elementalist. And have a focus macro so you can interrupt a fire caller if you need to. Otherwise, not really too much of anything. Just make sure you're for Phase 3 keeping Snarling Ward on cooldown, using all your DLC procs. That's another good time, really good time to use Berserk, especially if when you're tanking it for the first stage and you're getting your stacks tempered up. It's also worth noting that the swap time, it's like a minute. It's like a 1-minute cycle, so you can definitely get a use of Barkskin out of each cycle, if that makes any sense. So first time you tank him, you can Barkskin, and then about the same time when you're tanking him the next time around, you can also Barkskin again. So it's like you get him for 30 seconds, and your other tank gets him for 30 seconds, and it's a 30-second swap back and forth. So in theory, this may also be a good time for Heart of the Wild, because there's nothing else to tank there. I've never tried it, but it may be a good idea. You could actually use it for Heart of the Wild cat healing, because that's a really high, very high demands of healers in that phase, especially on tanks. So that might be something worth giving a go if it's causing you problems. Otherwise, this swap, move back and forth. This fight really isn't that hard, especially for tanks. It's a very trivial tank fight. Just make sure that you're communicating with everyone, and don't drop pools on top of elementalists, although I don't think tanks can actually get that debuff. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video, and good luck in Blackrock Foundry.
Premieres? You put them on the elementalist by any chance? Okay, this is it.
Alright, there we go.
Yep, got it.
Get an elemental. Swap, Gay run out for Blast. Swap, kill the Elementalist.
Beware.
Okay, gonna hem this next one.
Kill Yads.
Yeah, they're the shield.
Yep.
Dell, take your slag over to the next elementalist.
I think it's already dead.
No. Set 8%. Good.
Rallying cry here, just so we can use another intermittent cooldown.
Focus.
Beware.
Okay, kill the ads.
No, it's not dead. On the next blast, we're gonna use Trank again.
Beware.
They're I'm stunned inside a shield. I can't do anything. Grip the fire caller out, please. Okay, kill it.
Beware.
Okay, on this blast, use Strength then.
Shield's about to drop. Stab.
Beware. Beware. Beware.
1%.
There's an elemental that's look dead right there.
Beware.
Use Revival on the next blast. Shit. You can get Merrigan.
Get him up.
Beware.
Got him.
Need to kill these ads.
Beware. Beware. Beware.
It's down, or it's
Okay,
down right now.
hero and kill it.
Healing tide this next blast.
Beware. Beware.
Kill the ads.
Fuck. Fox is out.
Starting on the boss.
Beware.
Oh, never mind, Sony. Okay, now I have it.
Beware.
Let's get Rally and an amp up.
Beware.
What?
Beware.
CD and Sunny. I can't taunt for 2 more seconds.
Beware.
Got the boss.
Beware.
Hemming, catch up.
Right, moving back a bit.
Beware.
It's a bad melt. Take the melt to the fucking bag. Maybe you have to stop DPS.
Beware.
Let's Trank this blast now.
Beware.
revival the next blast?
I just did it.
Oh, good. That's fine.
Beware.
Thought we all snapped back up pretty quickly. Neck cooldown's healing tide. Just use it whenever you feel like it, because they'll be dead. It's our last cooldown we have.
Beware.
Tony.
Beware.
Oh, or don't get trapped.
Beware.
Good job.
Nice.